Hello, everybody. Welcome on in. This is the I guess this is a podcast. What did I actually name this podcast? Oh, So You Wanted a Podcast. Welcome to So You Wanted a Podcast. I'm SwdofBerserk. I'm here with our friend Dgrade. And we are going to be talking about retro games. Dgrade, do you want to give a little background about yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are for the people at home that don't know anything about you.
I guess. Dgrade, you pretty much told everyone that. I live in a semi truck. I play retro games, and I do everything on the road. That's all you need to know. I am what you see.
Hell yeah. You stream on Twitch, right? Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, you squeeze it in every so often, right?
When I have time, yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about some retro games. I know that we just had a bunch of reminiscing conversations about some of our favorite games, but let's explain some retro game journeys for everybody. Let's start with kind of like your earliest. Like, what were your first games? What were your first video games that you put hands on?
I would have to say it would be my uncle's Sega Master System.
Master System.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the game. I could tell you about the box. It was the box that came in. It was white. It had this guy on it with a gun. It was platforming. I can't even think of the name. But the other game was the one, because Sega Master System have a game already on system. You don't have to have a cart. It was the racing game that came with it. I played so many hours. So many hours just playing that racing game.
Yeah,
those are probably the very first games I played.
First games you played. I didn't have my first console was a Sega Genesis. My family decided to go with the Sega Genesis as opposed to the Super Nintendo. Not exactly sure why, but I probably played Sonic the Hedgehog a million billion gazillion times. But my yeah. I mean, if you had a Super Nintendo, you probably played Mario to death. I had a Sega Genesis, so I played Sonic to death.
I played Ninja Gaiden to death when at my grandma's house. She had the regular Nintendo.
Shinobi, Revenge of Shinobi. Yeah. I mean, I like the Sega Genesis. I remember going to the video store and renting different games, and it was always like movie games that we messed around with. I remember playing like the Sylvester Stallone movie Judge Dredd game. I remember RoboCop versus Terminator.
That one's hard.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, both of them are really hard. I remember having the Aladdin game. Like that game was impossible. I don't know anybody that could get past the freaking the Cave of Wonders or whatever, getting swept up by the lava. Never have anybody beat that. Same thing with the Lion King game. I don't know anybody that ever got past the jungle or the Stampede level.
That beat Lion King. I know a few people beat Lion King. I've seen a speed run of it. And I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah, the speed run on retro games is pretty ambitious for a lot.
I've been challenged to do the retro achievements on Lion King.
On the Lion King.
I was like, one of these days.
Yeah,
not now, but one of these days.
I mean, it's one of those classic like old retro games that people remember, and then they also remember that like hating that game.
Oh yeah.
I remember probably my favorite Sega Genesis game, probably the game that I played more than any of them put together, was Shining Force. That was the game that was like the game I remember. And I remember playing through that game a million times. I mean, it's an old school tactics RPG.
Yeah.
And it had so many like hidden things that were in there, like so many weird hidden things that you would never know about, like, or like that it kind of tricked you. Because when you got to like level 10, you could prestige your character. But if you waited until level 20 to prestige your character, they were just infinitely stronger. And you could wait to prestige them forever. And hidden characters and characters that were like outside of the normal game path that you had to do weird things for. And that's kind of the hidden wonders of a lot of those retro games, is they had tons of Easter eggs. They had a lot of loves, a lot
A
of
lot of
passion.
love.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't see that anymore. And it's sad.
Yeah, the Easter eggs are going to sort of a little bit the next topic here, but you know, when you had cartridges as a game medium, there was so much that the developers had to do to make sure that the game would even fit on the cartridge. They were
Oh
limited
yeah.
in the
A lot of
media.
cut.
Um,
A lot of cuts and all kinds of shit.
a lot of cheating, a lot of like using similar sprites that were different colors, or just slowed down or speed up versions of the same sound effects to create a variety of sounds, and just everything was limited by the media. But then you know, then you had CD-ROMs come out, and you just like tenfolded the amount of space that you had
Oh yeah.
on the games. um
And then you had the multi disc that
and
even expanded even farther.
Yep, and I remember one of my early PC games that I remember struggling with forever was Myst. Myst, yeah. Did you ever play Myst?
No. But I did play Silver. I think that's by the same.
Yeah. So Myst was an interesting game because that game had a lot of pictures and a lot of music and a lot of recorded audio that was really key to telling the story in Myst. And they were restricted to only having one disc for Myst. They could only have one CD for whatever reason. They didn't want to have multiple CDs. It was just one. And so the placement of each file in the disc is exactly precise based on where the laser in the CD-ROM tray moves back and forth to access each file, because otherwise it wouldn't run properly. That's how precise the developers back in the day had to get their builds of these
You
games
just
together.
learned something new.
Because nowadays Call of Duty is 200 gigabytes or something like that. I don't know. Just like, who cares how big your game is?
Outrageous. Nah. Just make
um,
it bigger so they can't download anything else.
yeah, heaven forbid you have to download an update and you need 400 gigs of space to download your update or whatever. But I digress there. I think that while I did spend a lot of time on the Sega Genesis era, I think that the bigger era of gaming for me was obviously like the late 90s, early 2000s. The PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64 era was really where games my like that's where my retro sweet spot is for myself. I'm not thinking about like Galaga and Pac-Man and pinball and stuff like that, even though I love going to the arcade and playing those kinds of things. Like the PlayStation 1 era was my retro perfect spot.
I went back, played some Atari, played some regular Nintendo, played some arcades. PlayStation 2 has always been my favorite. PlayStation 2, best console ever made. You can't find me on it. That's just how you won't change.
I mean, it had full backwards compatibility, so I mean, like you didn't even have to get rid of all your old games. You got to play all your PlayStation 1 games.
That too.
But
PlayStation 2 is my sweet spot.
PlayStation 2 is your sweet spot? Well, let's talk about PlayStation 1 real fast and Nintendo 64, and then we can move on to PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, that whole era. So for PlayStation 1 or N64, I assume you were a PlayStation guy and not so much N64.
I had an N64. I can talk about it.
I got an N64 like near the end of the 64 rotation, but I still had. I mean, I had the classics. You couldn't have a 64 and not have GoldenEye, Ocarina of Time, Star Fox.
Nope.
Like you had to, like, it was like if you had a 64, those games came with it. And I had those three before I had Mario 64.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I had all those. I had Blast Corps, NWO versus WCW. What are the other ones that I have? Perfect Dark.
Perfect Dark.
Conqueror's yes, Perfect Dark. Conqueror's Bad Fur Day. You can't forget about them.
I mean, Conqueror's Bad Fur Day was like the first mature rated game, like the first actual maturity game that was on a console. And love Nintendo for just being like, yeah, we can greenlight that.
Yeah, let's do it. I don't know how you did it, but let's do it.
Somebody didn't read the script on that one. Somebody did, that got slipped through without much audit.
This is just another Banjo-Kazooie knock.
But the 64, so the 64 was the first controller with an analog stick, right? And so that's pretty significant in gaming. That, I mean, the controller looked the weirdest possible thing. Nobody knew how to grip it. You needed 3 hands or something to wield it properly. But I mean, having that analog stick, and I remember playing like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and actually having up and down aiming with your analog stick on those games, and it was absurd. It was absurd. And Perfect
that just
Dark
made me think of something funny. Since you mentioned GoldenEye and the controller, speedrunners use a double. I don't know if they still do, but they had 2 N64 controllers taped together.
Oh goodness!
And they used that. I'm like, why? How?
They wanted 2 analog sticks. They wanted 2 analog sticks so they could move and aim. I mean, that's
I just remember seeing pictures about that, and I'm like, okay, that's why.
I mean, ingenuity. You look at speedrunners today. If you watch anybody play any games that have any amount of camera control nowadays, and they're claw gripping their controller, they're doing some weird thing where they're not even holding their control, like holding the analog stick with their thumbs. They're just like, gripping it in the most awkward way possible that you could think of, or all the competitive controllers have paddles on the back for your fingers to actuate and stuff, and I'm not gonna fault them for taping 2 controllers together.
Remind me of my controller. Paddles on the back.
There you go, paddles on the back. That's the way to do it right there. But the 64, I just remember that like the 64 was kind of still archaic in the design. I mean, it had cartridges. So the cartridges had a classic feel to them. And obviously the cartridges were more durable than CDs for the PlayStation was. But as far as like the games themselves, I mean, like the PlayStation 1, holy moly, they had so much more space to work with and such a freedom of medium for people to create on, as opposed to having to go through and adhere to Nintendo's pretty rigid standards for their the cartridge medium.
Yeah, I mean, PlayStation was trying to gear to more of a so you could get more mature games. Resident Evil, which also got ported over to the 64.
I remember
stuff like
seeing Resident Evil.
Duke Nukem.
Duke Nukem, yeah, Duke Nukem 3D. I remember going back a generation. I remember playing Duke Nukem on DOS, and it was not that. It was not like Wolfenstein or Doom. It was like a platformer where you were shooting like little laser beams across the map at stuff, and all you were trying to do is get your 3 keys to get out of your level or whatever. Like very simplistic design. And that's when I remember Duke Nukem. Oh, yeah. And then I remember seeing Duke Nukem 3D, and I was like, what is this? What is this? Why are there strippers? Why like why like I just didn't understand.
Are you allowed to even say that?
But yeah, it really came into its own at that point. I mean, I guess it's no worse than Wolfenstein having you blow up Nazis the entire time and Robo Hitler. But yeah,
yeah, I think they changed that after a while, didn't they?
Nope, I'm pretty sure it's the same. like I'm pretty sure that the Return to Castle Wolfenstein is pretty much just the most exaggerated thing. The newest Wolfenstein, I'm pretty sure had me like gawking at how crazy it was. and how outlandish. I think at one point the main character's head, the main character is beheaded, and his head is caught mid fall off of like something, and then whisked away to be grafted onto a new super soldier body, so that he could continue to fight.
Yeah, I've been wanting to play it, but I never. I need to play it. I need to play it.
So, so I talked about this with you a little bit previously, but PlayStation 1 was like my sweet spot because I got to that was the era that when CD-ROMs were there, that was the era where if you had a little bit of ingenuity, you could get a modded system, you could start burning your games, like you could have like I had a book with like 200 games for PlayStation. Most of them that I never played because they were all pretty bad. Because I had every game, right?
Early PlayStation.
But like running into the situations where I had a copy of Metal Gear Solid, and running into the part where you gotta have the, like, it tells you to look on the back of the CD case for Meryl's codec, and not having the CD case because I have a copied version of it, and having to spend 2 hours individually searching for the codec number. Just
I remember
great
doing
stuff.
that when the first time I emulated it. I'm like, oh no.
I don't know how it treats like switching. Well, I mean, I guess you can go in the emulator options and switch controller ports for like the
you can.
The Psycho Mantis fight, and then I don't know what he does for reading your thing, but I remember it read my save file for Castlevania Symphony of the Night and was like, "Hey, you're only 98% of your way through the." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" Blew my freaking mind.
He also mentions other games. He mentioned like half my memories for that one, and I was like, "I'm turning you off. You know too much.
Know too much.
Bye bye."
And like Resident Evil, I never like the idea of a survival horror game. Like the whole survival horror genre spawned during that time. Like Resident Evil 1 and 2, and like Dino Crisis, and Fatal Frame, and like all kinds of horror games just spawned out of there. And the Silent Hill series. I mean, that was the dawn of like real horror games. There wasn't really horror games before that,
No. And then they started doing samurais versus zombies. Soul of the Samurai, which you saw that I was playing earlier. Yeah. Which is literally a zombified demon. It's like the grandfather of Onimusha. If you ever played that?
Yep. And I mean, Onimusha has another game coming out soon. I say soon at some point, right?
Yeah. I just heard about it. I'm like, oh, they are okay. That's cool. Don't mess it up, please.
And I mean, in the same console generation, you still had Sega kicking around too. I remember wanting a Dreamcast, but I never got a Dreamcast until many moons later.
I still never owned a Dreamcast. I owned a Saturn, but not a Dreamcast.
The Sega Saturn. Oh my goodness! I remember the commercial for the Sega Saturn, and it was always like this alien commercial where the alien would like kill the person that was playing the Sega Saturn or whatever. They had some of the most brutal commercials for video games back in the day.
Dude, so crazy, so crazy. I remember seeing the commercial, the trailer for Final Fantasy VIII when they first brought it over. And I'm sitting there watching it. I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. Play the game. And I was like, this is nothing like the trailer. They didn't what?
Yeah.
Go back and watch that trailer now. You're like, did they even play the game?
Well,
one man trying to conquer love. I'm like, what? Okay.
I mean, what was the card game in that game? Triple Triad or something like that?
Oh, I love Triple Triad.
I mean, I probably played Triple Triad. It was like every time Final Fantasy came out with a game, I would just play the bonus game that was inside it. Like I played Triple Triad, Final Fantasy X. I was the Blitzball world champion, That was the thing, people play The Witcher and then they just play Gwent the entire time, Um, well, let's move into your favorite era, the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
You said that was your favorite generation. Why was PS2, like why was the mid 2000s your favorite generation of retro?
You got for PlayStation 2, obviously. You got the best JRPGs. I've always been a JRPG fan since I first played Final Fantasy 7. That's the one that got me. Couldn't figure out how to get past half of it when I was young.
Well, that's why you got what was it? PlayStation Magazine, and it had a 6-page expose on how to get Knights of the Round Table and how to raise your golden chocobo and how to get Yuffie.
9 years old, man.
Yeah.
I wasn't smart enough to read magazines. I just looked at the pretty pictures. But no, once I figured out I liked Final Fantasy 7, it was all about, JRPGs. And then I went on a big Final Fantasy kick, played all them, got to 10. I was like, this is cool. Don't like the main character, but this is cool. And then
Aaron, right? Like everybody loved Aaron, and everybody was like, "Oh, why? What is Titus? Was his name? I think." Yeah, it was like nobody liked Titus.
Man. Every JRPG needs his bitch boy. Every JRPG. But no, 12 and all that, and then you go into some weird games like the Bouncer. Dude, I played the Bouncer so much. And everyone's like, that's not a good game. I was like, no, it's fucking amazing. It is a JRPG, a beat 'em up, fucking amazing. Just play it.
It was certainly unique for it. It didn't have an analogous. And now you have like the Yakuza series, right? That is, in a lot of ways similar.
Mm-hmm. Very similar. Better. It is better with the storytelling and jankiness and everything. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I do like Orphan, which is like the worst PlayStation 2 game ever made. I would say that is far worse. There is far worse.
There's always far worse.
Orphan. Yeah. Orphan. It's horrible, but I had so much fun playing it. I don't know why. I hated myself for playing it, but I had fun. that was like every PlayStation 2 game I played. But I might hate myself for playing it, but I had fun.
But you had so many really deep series for PlayStation 2. We were talking a little bit about like the Dot Hack series, right? And the 4-piece Dot Hack Perfection game, just Love like it. Good Lord, was that an experience?
Dungeon crawling greatness.
Pseudo MMO, like it was simulated MMO complete with email. I remember, and I forget if it was like game 3 or game 4, but you had the one character that was like your healer or something like that, and she's just like, "Hey, I'm sorry I haven't talked to you for 3 months. Had a baby."
Yeah. Oh, go. Well, okay. Yeah. Go take care of your kid. Go. It's fine. We'll just use this person.
Oh my goodness. But the PS2, PS2 had its neighbors, so to speak. It had Xbox. Mm-hmm. Xbox first online gaming, really. Like, I mean, PlayStation had its network adapter, but like, what did you really play on PlayStation Network? There was only a couple. It was literally EverQuest,
Fantasy
and that was
Star?
it. EverQuest. That was the only thing you played.
Fantasy Star Online.
Fantasy Star Online. I never played Fantasy Star. I never played EverQuest, to be honest. But, but yeah, the first pioneering into online gaming, right? And Xbox kind of took over that entire market, like Halo.
Oh yeah, Halo. So many nights at my friend's house playing Halo.
Whether it was LANing, like LAN party, it had 4 controller ports built in. You understood that game was that console was built for LAN parties.
Grudge coach, man.
And I mean, like that whole console generation, I think, you can talk about a lot of different things, but that console generation was defined by the fact that all the controllers had analog sticks. It was the first time that you really had true 3-dimensional movement in your games. and had every developer developing in that 3-dimensional space for the first time, and you ended up with, Halo. Like it is the template in which all first person shooters were built off of afterwards.
Oh yeah.
And then you had the GameCube.
Yeah, I can't think of the only game I can think of an actual first person shooter on PlayStation was Call of Duty, wasn't it?
Call of Duty,
like the first Call of Duty.
Battlefield, maybe. PlayStation 3 had a couple games. It had Killzone and Resistance Fall of Man.
Red Alert.
But really, like, yeah, it was pretty much the generic stuff. I mean, Microsoft had Halo. GameCube did not have first person shooters. It had the same ones the PlayStation had, right?
No.
But I mean, most people that are picking up the Nintendo consoles were picking them up for specific games. Like Nintendo always had exclusive games that, made it.
Mario, Pokemon,
Zeldas.
Yeah.
For me though, you know what game made me buy a GameCube?
What game?
Resident Evil 4. The greatest game ever made.
They had it on the PlayStation 2.
Well, they didn't have it on the PlayStation 2 until the end of its life cycle. It took like 4 years for it to come out. I mean, granted, Resident Evil 4 is on the most platforms of any video game ever. Like, historically in the Guinness Book.
I like, to this day, still one of my favorite Resident Evils, Code Veronica.
They're going to remake it. They said they were going to remake it. I did play it. I did play Code Veronica. Oh man, that one was good. That one was good. It was crazy. It was crazy though. That game was hard too. Like they were like, okay, you beat Resident Evil 2, you beat Resident Evil 3. I get it. You understand this whole thing. We're gonna make it harder. We're gonna make the puzzles harder. We're gonna give you less ammo. We're gonna put more zombies, and we're gonna put more random enemies.
Backtrack to the first person shooters. PlayStation 2 had Resident Evil Mercenaries, which was a first-person shooter, kind of rail shooter.
They had the rail shooter. Oh my goodness, I didn't even talk about rail shooters. Well,
it wasn't really a rail shooter. You could move around.
Yeah,
it was technically a rail shooter. It was kind of like a rail shooter.
It was you move the screen sort of around, and it sort of moved for you, and you're progressing through the levels.
It was a map. There was a map you could walk around. You could pick where you walk. But yeah, it felt like he was on a track, like a 1 square by 1 square you move type thing. From what I remember,
I mean the rail shooter is a classic of shoot. I mean, it's the OG shooter. It's the arcade, Time Crisis, House of the Dead.
I mean, I still go back to N64 and play Sin and Punishment, which is one of the best rail shooters I have ever played. So fun. It's weird, but it's so fun.
Well, they're all a little weird, right? They're all a little odd.
Well, by the end of it, you destroy a clone of the Earth. It's like, okay, what's even happening? Okay.
Why does that remind me of what was that game where there was the guy that has like 6 arms or something like that, and he's just super mad.
Azure.
Yeah, and he like fights the god that's like bigger than the earth or whatever, and he's just so mad, he's just punching people. God of War. Oh man, I forgot about God of War. God of War coming out on PlayStation 2, right?
Yeah. And PlayStation 2. There was God of War 1, 2, and 3. No,
3 was on PS3. Yeah. They snuck that in.
Was it PS3?
Yeah, that was that was one of the selling points of PS3, and then they came out with the remakes of 1 and 2 on PlayStation 3 to try and get you to buy it. I remember that pretty.
They never. Then Chain of Olympus was on PSP.
Yes.
Yeah.
And PSP, where does that fit into this equation? I guess that was somewhere between PS2 and PS. Well, it was after PS3, right? Man,
I mean, Yeah, PSP came out with the PS2 era, if I remember correctly. I mean, I can go grab and look. I can look at some of the back boxes here.
I, I fondly remember the PSP because I was like my dad was always sick and we were at the hospital all the time, and so it was really nice to have something that we could watch movies on and had access to the internet.
Mhm.
And while it didn't actually have access to the internet from the start, I remember that Wave Race. Wait, no, wait, was it Wave?
Mhm.
No, it wasn't Wave Race. It was Wipeout Pure. Wipeout Pure on the PSP had a web browser that you could kind of like circumvent into. And man, oh man, I remember having that. Having Lumens. I remember playing a ton of Lumens, and just we had every movie on UMD. UMD
I
was
played a lot of
was
Monster
going to be the
Hunter.
future. Monster Hunter. Oh goodness.
I played a lot of Monster Hunter.
But I mean, I also like I didn't really get most of the Nintendo standalone consoles, but I did have a Game Boy. I had a Game Boy. I had a Game Boy Color. I remember getting a Game Boy Color, and it was like the best day of my life. Because Game Boy Color had, or not Game Boy Color. I got a Game Boy SP, the Super Color or whatever. And man, that was awesome. Having the backlit screen, having the rechargeable battery pack. Ooh, Game Boy Advance is where it was at.
I remember the day I got a Game Boy Color.
Oh,
it was my 7th birthday, and my dad. I was one of the only good memories about my dad. He bought me a Game Boy Color for my birthday with Pokemon Blue.
Pokemon Blue.
And that was the only game I had. That was the only game I had for 2 years on my Game Boy.
On my Game Boy, I think I had 2 games that I played. It was Tetris and I can't remember the other one. Pokemon Red.
Probably.
I remember borrowing my friend's Pokemon Red, and they were like, "You can borrow it, but you can't save over my save file." And so I was like, "Okay." And so, well, in order to like progress, you have to leave your Game Boy on for all those hours, right? And my Game Boy ran on AA batteries, and so I remember being like, "All right, I have 20 hours of battery life before it goes out. I've got to try and get as far as I can before the battery dies because I can't save." So it was like almost like a Nuzlocke, like a speed running the game. And I was like, okay, I got to get this game so I can actually save the game or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got that. Game Boy had some of the weirdest accessories, but they had this it wasn't a battery pack, but it was like a solar charger with a fucking a magnifying glass.
Yeah, the magnifying glass accessory on all of those systems was probably like the number one accessory. I know when I worked at GameStop, that was like the one thing that people would get on almost all their handhelds was whatever the magnifying glass thing was. And there was 6 companies. There was always everybody got the Mad Catz one, which was absolute garbage.
Yeah.
But it was also $10 or something. So you just get the Mad Catz one and replace it every time your kid smashed it or whatever. Oh my goodness. Well, in that same era of time, so I graduated from high school in 2005. To tell everybody how old I am. But one of the things that was in that era that was incredibly impactful for me is in 2005, I started playing World of Warcraft. And from that point on, I mean, I had spent a good amount of time being a PC gamer. I had played a lot of Diablo 2. I was kind of a little bit of a Blizzard fanboy at that time. You know, I really like StarCraft, really like Diablo. I really like Warcraft. I played a lot of Warcraft 3, but World of Warcraft, there was nothing. There was nothing that had their claws in me like World of Warcraft.
I think the only experience I have with MMOs is one of my friends in high school. He played a lot of EverQuest. And I watched him play it. He tried to get me into it. I could not get into. The only MMO I could actually get into was a arena fighter called Fantasy Earth Zero.
What was it called again?
And it was a Fantasy Earth Zero.
Fantasy Earth Zero. Okay.
It was a 50 versus 50. Yeah, 50 versus 50. You get to pick your own country. There's like 6 countries you could pick off, and you just pretty much fight for the map.
You were playing
It was great.
100-player Risk.
Pretty much. Pretty much. You can pick 3 classes. You pick rogue, warrior, or mage. I think or an fencer. I think they had a fencer by the end of it. I don't know. The 3 main classes. And you pretty much, yeah, it was just 50 versus 50. You fly over the map, you collect crystals, you can do big summons. It was made just for Enix.
Oh, wow.
It was great. Yeah. You could you pretty much, you had a whole team. One person had like the summoning material, and you had to collect the crits, people mine up these crystals or whatever, and they give it all to this one person, something like a giant fucking dragon or something, and they go attack the other castle. And everyone's battling. Crazy. It's just crazy.
I mean, so both of those games, World of Warcraft and that whole era of games were sort of defined as the handoff between the solo play experience and multiplayer. Mm-hmm. And just like that kicked off the kind of a culture shift of, do you develop deep and immersive story first person experiences, or are you building something that is meant to be multiplayer, where you're pitting people against each other in this new online space that exists, because that didn't exist before. And on top of that, we're talking about PlayStation Magazine, Nintendo Power, going and finding the tips and tricks and the secrets and the Easter eggs of these games, and you telling your buddy about the secret stuff you found, and they're going, "You're lying," and then they go home and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that you can skip the entirety of Super Mario Brothers. Oh my goodness." And people, it was a lot of word of mouth stuff and a lot of self-discovery of those things. And then the internet happened. And then everybody had access to everything.
Knows everything.
Yep. And then everything, I mean, it had a similar experience in a lot of things. Like I played a lot of competitive card games. I played a lot of Magic the Gathering in that same time. And I remember that when I was starting to do tournament play and actually try and qualify for the Pro Tour, playing games at that time, your local card players that you were playing with, the best deck of your local card group was usually the style of deck that you would take to a bigger event. And then you would see stuff that you had never even heard of. People building decks that you'd never even heard of. The meta was completely unknown for the most part. And you were just trying to do your best. And then the internet happened. And every week, every single tournament had a tournament report. You could see the top best decks. And then all of a sudden you start seeing the same decks are the top decks at every single event, all over the place. Very little innovation in between each one. Just pretty much people soft tuning the details of those things. And so you start to see the same thing in gaming. If you are going through and playing a game, there's a tutorial for games out now that are before the games come out, right?
Oh yeah. And then once the games come out, you got 50 people doing long plays, and you're like, okay, how do I beat this? Oh, let's just go to YouTube.
Yep, just go to YouTube. And you find out everything, and all of a sudden that kind of like, in a little bit, that magic kind of disappears. It's hard to capture it. It is certainly hard to capture it as a Twitch streamer playing games and trying to like be like, I understand, guys. I understand you love this game. I understand you beating the crap out of it. And you know every detail about it.
Fine.
Let me please play the game. Let me fail. Let me fail. Let me miss stuff.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah. Something I can help you with. No, you can't.
No, I don't want help. I understand. I want you to watch me struggle. I want you to enjoy my struggle. But it's the inevitability of having access to more information, right? So then I remember the 360 coming out and how big of a deal the 360 was. The first HD system. I remember people fighting for that system coming out because I worked at GameStop at launch for the 360, I remember the frenzy of just trying to find a trying to find a system, and people are like tripping over themselves to like. I didn't even like football games, and I remember Madden was a launch title, and the people in Madden looked like people, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
And that was like, why?
And Elder Scrolls Oblivion was a massive, huge thing. Like it was a huge game. Obviously Oblivion or obviously Skyrim, trumped it years later.
Yeah.
But like without Oblivion, you don't have Skyrim.
Skyrim.
And games like BioShock, and just the graphics leap, the complexity leap of the AI for the characters, for just the complexity of the levels, and being on a DVD as opposed to being on a CD, you having even more space to work with for cinematics and for
that was on Blu-ray. No, PlayStation 3 was on Blu-ray.
Yep, PlayStation 3 was on Blu-ray. Xbox tried to go the HD DVD route. If you remember that thing, I remember they had like the HD DVD side thing, but the reason that the PlayStation 3 was on Blu-rays was back in the day, Sony. So back in the day when VHS became the prevalent media for videos, Sony or there was a competing media called Betamax, which Betamax was a smaller cartridge, a shorter runtime, much higher quality. But Sony owned Betamax, and VHS ended up becoming way more prevalent across the media market. And Sony didn't want to lose the media war a second time. So that's why they included Blu-ray on their in all their consoles, was to help push that format. Because if you could buy a Blu-ray player and a console at the same time, that means you already have a Blu-ray player in your house. That means you're probably going to buy a Blu-ray version of the movie instead of buying an HD DVD player and an HD DVD movie, So stroke of genius for them for securing and locking down that media format. Holy moly.
So back to the Xbox 360. I owned a lot of games on the 360. Lost Odyssey, probably one of the best games ever made.
I have a copy on my shelf. I have a copy on my shelf.
You know how good that game is. But I had more fun with the 360 arcade than probably most of the games.
Going back, like what was it? There was a game on the arcade called Geometry Wars. That was just like a little Space Invader ship, and things would fly around. You would shoot in omnidirections and just try not to die. I played the hell out of Geometry Wars, and I think they had multiple sequels to Geometry Wars come out for like the game, the DS, or maybe it was the Game Boy Advance, and the PSP.
I think it was the DS. They had one on the no. Did they have one on? I think they had one on the Vita. I don't know about the PSP. They probably did.
Oh my goodness, the Vita! I bought that thing. I bought that thing. I loved it. I bought that with one game, I think.
I love my Vita.
So the 360 was was your console of that generation. Did you have a PS3 at all?
I did have a PS3 for a little bit. I didn't have that many games for the PS3. I played I played a lot of Tales of Exonia 1 and 2. And what was that? I don't even remember. I didn't play the PS3 or 4 much. I had a 360.
Yeah.
I
remember
that was like
just not liking the PlayStation 3 controller very much. It didn't fit well in my hands, and the Xbox controller was just so much more comfortable.
It was. I mean, I was more upset than myself that I got a 360 than a PlayStation. So I was always a PlayStation fan. But all my friends had a 360. And I was like, okay.
Well, people would ask me all the time when I worked at GameStop which one was better, the Xbox 360 or the PS3. And I would tell them every time that it didn't matter which one I thought was better. The one that the game console that they should get is, firstly, the one that had the games they wanted to play on it. So if you want to play Halo, there wasn't a choice, you were getting an Xbox. If you want to play God of War, there wasn't a choice, you're getting a PlayStation. But if you didn't have console exclusives that you cared about, the second question was which controller felt better in your hands. Because if you're going to play a game system for thousands of hours over the course of a number of years, make sure it's the controller that isn't going to cause your hands to cramp. You know?
Oh yeah. And to this day, the Xbox 360 controller was probably one of the best controllers ever made.
I mean, that's the staggered analog sticks are where it's at. Like I mean, the PlayStation 5 controller, at least they made that a little bit bigger and like a wider, so it's easier for your thumbs to sit more comfortably on it. But the analog sticks being so far down, especially with my big old gorilla hands, just felt so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable to like hold on to. It just, I don't know. But man, oh man, the 360 and the PS3, they also had kind of like a weird relationship with the technology, but because PlayStation Network was free, and Microsoft always had Xbox Live that you had to pay $50 a month for, and I would find that
$5 a month.
I would find that people would buy Xbox Live over PlayStation, like free PlayStation Network, like 8 times out of 10. They were like, I don't care, it's $50 a year or whatever.
I paid for the $50 a year and got the 3 free games every month or 2 free games every month. I remember Dead Space being on there. I was like, I want to play that game.
Oh my goodness, Dead Space! Oh, the game is so good.
That game ruined my life for a good week or two. Could not put that game down.
That game gave me PTSD for dead bodies in games. There's a point where you're walking through a hallway in Dead Space, and there's just a bunch of dead bodies. And when you get to the end, there's some creature at the end that's like hawking weird alien loogies, and they're running at like the different bodies that are on the ground and turning them into necromorphs. And every time afterwards, I was like, there is not going to be a dead body that is in here that isn't stomped into absolute paste. Everybody gets stomped into paste.
Man.
And I don't think I ever recovered from that.
Every time. No. Take their spikes, impale them, stomp them, everything. No.
Yeah. I just recently playing the Silent Hill 2 remake, and literally every single monster that was everywhere got the stomp until it was super duper dead. Yeah, I just goodness gracious.
From Dead Space 2, I still remember the eyeball scene.
Oh my goodness, the eyeballs and just oh my god. Yeah, they definitely went there. They definitely went there.
You remember the commercials? Your mother will hate this game. Yeah.
In space, no one can hear you scream. I remember that being their logo. Oh my goodness. But man, on the first person shooter kind of like spectrum there, I remember you were all hot and bothered for first person shooters, but I was a Gears of War player. Third person shooter, tactical shooters.
Gears of War. I played Gears of War with my friend Jose. He was all about it. And he made me stay up for almost 48 hours straight. We played the first one and the second one back to back. Yeah.
And the end of the second one is just, I mean, goodness. The Gears of War 1 and 2 are masterpieces of story, and they just felt really good. They felt really good to play too. Man, Dominic Santiago. Holy.
They got the cover. That's one game they got the cover system down packed. Going from one cover to another cover. More games should implement.
It was so smooth and like same deal with like the double gun setup. It had squad gameplay, even if you were playing solo. It had seamless co-op, and then the multiplayer. The multiplayer was fast and brutal. Like I'm talking about you getting shot just a handful of times, going down, shotgun blast, single shotgun blast over a piece of cover to just splatter a guy was core gameplay for the multiplayer. It was fast and brutal, and it was just people screaming about, "Oh my god, your shotgun skill! Like you just shotting people to the face and sniping people from across the map." It wasn't balanced. It was brutal. It was just so good.
It was so good. Army of Two was another one he made me play.
Oh, Army of Two. Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that right there, like the before the 360 PlayStation 3 era, there wasn't a lot of co-op, right? Because they couldn't design around you having another person. They couldn't really build a game from the ground up with the idea that you were going to have another person with you to play these games. Yeah. And while there was multiplayer for games, like it was mostly for fighting games. Mostly fighting games, maybe some racing games. But in that era, you had your first real, true, built from the ground up co-op experiences, or team play experiences, and it was glorious. I mean, it was the natural bridge from making almost every game have some kind of multiplayer feature if you just started with the feature built into the mainstay of your gameplay.
Yeah. So I got a question for you.
Ask.
This is retro game. What is the one retro game you go back to about once a year or however long you want to say and just play?
So, Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Which one is that?
For PlayStation 1, it's for PlayStation 1. It is the first Castlevania that you really actually get to have equipment and stuff. Like it's the first, like you play Alucard. It's got the castle with the reverse castle. You're trying to hunt down Richter Belmont, who's being possessed by this sorcerer called Shaft, who's trying to resurrect Dracula. Yada yada yada. But the big things for the draw for me on that game was, one, I remember back when I played it as a kid that it was incredibly hard. Like the game was really, really difficult. And I remember the game being massive and spending hours and hours and hours exploring it. And I remember the last time that I went back and played it, I think I beat the whole game, like 100% of the game in like 6 or 8 hours or something. I just sat down and just played through it all. Because if you know about the game, you just kind of go. And there, just like a lot of retro games, it has a lot of secrets. So there were things that weren't clearly defined in it. Like, for example, there's a weapon called the shield rod, and it's an okay weapon. It's just a rod that you hit things with. But if you have a shield in your offhand and you hit both the shield block button and the attack button with the shield rod at the same time, every single shield in the game had a unique spell it would cast. And so some of them were like defensive spells, but some of them were offensive spells. And so your character was Alucard. He's Dracula's son. He had a shield called Alucard Shield, which is the shield you start with in the game, and it gets stolen from you by death at the beginning of the game. If you manage to find your shield, use it with the shield rod, it has an attack where if you're holding up your shield, any enemy that comes into contact with the shield takes huge damage, like max possible hit damage, and drains their life into your life pool.
God, that sounds OP.
It is. You just run through bosses with it, and you just kill everything on your path. And on top of it, the game had spells, and so you could go to the librarian in the game and purchase the spells from the librarian, but the librarian didn't sell you the spells. The librarian just told you the button command for the spells. You always had the spells. So if you know the button commands, you can use the spells from the beginning of the game. And the best spell in the game is called Soul Steal, which every enemy on the entire screen that you can see when you do Soul Steal, it hits all of them for a massive amount of damage, and it does it in ticks. And every tick that it hits every enemy for, it drains their life into your life. So if you knew about like the spells and if you knew about the shield rod and how it interacted, you just go through and rip bosses apart. Just any boss, doesn't matter what it was. But yeah, that's the game that I like to go back to because it just it reminds me. It just reminds me of classic stuff. And one of the games I wish, like, I'll ask you this questions afterward. Game that I never played that I kind of wish I go back and play. So, you know, I'll try go back and play it at some point. Super Metroid. Never played Super Metroid. Love Castlevania. Love Metrovania games. Never have played a Metroid game. Never played a Metroid game. Only played Castlevania games.
Play one.
I know it's going to be.
I played them. Not good at them, but I kind of not retro. The Switch has a game. There was a Metrovania. I think what it's called. It's been so long. But it was in. I can't think. Don't forget about the name.
What's it look like?
But
what's your guy look like?
It looks like fun. It looks like a Metroid game, but you're a dude. You're a guy, like a regular guy wearing a regular shirt. And it's a gigantic. Dude, it was on the tip of my tongue too. It starts with the A. Yeah,
it's
I
not
can't
Among
think
Us.
of that right now.
It's not Among Us. Know that.
No. I'm gonna look it up. Dude, I put like 3 weeks in that game. I can't think.
Goodness. I mean, the genre is alive and well. I mean, Hollow Knight is one of my favorite games within that genre, and that is much more recent. I can't wait for Silk Song to come out, which is the sequel. Hopefully, it will come out eventually. Knock on wood. That's only been in development for a decade or something.
Axiom Verge. There we go.
I think I remember that popping up, Axiom Verge, in my like. Yeah, I think I remember something popping up on that it won awards or something like that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to give this game. It was like the first real Metroidvania I played, start to finish. If you want to play if you like Metrovanias, I recommend that one, 100%.
It certainly looks cool. I have it pulled up now. It looks kind of dope. It has that really like retro feel to it too.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness, now I lost all my notes and stuff. Okay.
Oh no.
So I replays those two things at you. What is the retro game that you go back to most often? And what is the retro game that you wish you have played but have never played? If there is one.
Oh, there's a few retro games I've been wanting to play for the longest time. The one I go to most often is Legend of Dragon, PlayStation 1. I do one playthrough once a year. Every year, Legend of Dragon.
Why Legend of Dragon?
Okay. I'm not good. Legend of Dragon has Final Fantasy VII battle system, but you have button combinations. It's like a rhythm game when you attack. So you have to hit like X in a certain rhythm, double strike, fucking amazing. And then halfway through the first disc, you get to transform to a dragon little battle. So you have like magic. So go through this whole game, pretty much just doing your regular attack, doing your combinations, and they get hard. They get hard by the end of it. But the storytelling, the graphics, it was supposed to be the Final Fantasy killer. It was made by the same one of the old directors of Fantasy. I think it was someone that was part of the Final Fantasy team made this game. It was supposed to be Final Fantasy, but it has one of the best JRP stories you probably ever played, plus some of the most memorable characters. And it's a cult classic.
But I mean,
Play it if you ever.
I remember seeing Legend of Dragoon. Right, Legend of Dragoon. I remember seeing Legend of
Yeah.
Dragoon, but I never played it. It never hit my radar. I think in that era of games, if it wasn't a PlayStation 1 game, right? It was PlayStation 2.
That's PlayStation 1.
PlayStation 1. Man, I guess those kind of RPGs just never made their way, because I mean, I had every game that was in the freaking video game store, like in the movie shop, but I don't think that they would bring or get those like JRPG really long games. I don't ever remember seeing Final Fantasy 7 in there, or even Final Fantasy like 8 or whatever. Like I don't remember seeing any of that stuff because they were too long for people to rent and play.
I mean, that's why they have memory cards now. Or then.
Yeah.
Oh, on a memory card.
Speaking of memory cards,
next week ran it again.
You said you never had a Dreamcast. I got a Dreamcast like way later, but Dreamcast had the coolest memory cards because the memory cards were like little game players. They had like a D-pad and an A/B button on them, and each of the saves, like some of them would have little mini games that you could play like on the go, so that when you came back, you would earn like stuff for the main game when you were like out doing stuff. That was the coolest shit. I just thought that was awesome.
Legend of Dragoon had one of that like that too for the PlayStation. They have those Japanese, so you had to have the Japanese play it. Never got tested out myself. I always wanted to. Even the memory card would have a like 4 buttons or 3 buttons on it, dig or whatever you had to do on the thing. But I remember like, because there's an area in the store you go to where you first see it, and there's something there, but you can never access it. And I was like, and I finally just saw it one day on that. This Japanese exclusive mini game that comes on the memory card. I'm like, what the hell? They had those?
Yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time for them to experiment with some stuff and do some cool stuff. And a lot of that innovation, the difference in the generation, right? Like, do you feel like there are certain aspects of like retro games that are like lost on today's games? Like something that makes today's games way different than old retro games?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot. The reason why I don't play a lot of modern games anymore. Every now and then I see one that catches my fancy. I'm like, okay, I won't play it. I never play it. I haven't played a new game in 3 years. But the reason why I keep going back to retro games is it just seems like there's more love. There's always something new. Even if it's like an old game you played 100 times, you're going to go find something. Even if it's just like one little item that does nothing, but you found it. That was cool. Whoa, this guy drops this. What does it do? Oh, it does nothing. Hey, cool. Hey.
It does nothing, but it entertains, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. It seems like what's the new game that came out recently that everyone's playing now?
Marvel Rivals?
Yes, Marvel Rivals. That I've seen people play it. It looks like Overwatch. It's pretty much Overwatch.
Yes, it's it's Overwatch with Marvel characters. Yes, yeah.
I mean,
so for me, like, it's not so much that the games have things that are missing from what from what I would consider a retro title to be missing. I miss that. I miss that. I think I just miss the internet not being there. Like that. The discovery aspect, right? I get to play a game and I get to have my experience with it, and then you play that game and you have your experience with it, and then we talk about our shared experiences with those games and the things that you did and found out being different than the things that I did and I found out, and then I want to go back and replay those games with the knowledge of what you have shared with me to try and find the things that you did. And likewise, you probably want to go through with the knowledge of the things that I found and play through it. And instead, now you have it, you have this little, you have the world telling you all of the information right from the start. And a lot of times, I mean, I even find myself doing this. I'll play through and I'll beat a game, and then I'll be like, oh, this game has 6 endings to it. All right, I beat it. I got the ending I was going to get. I'm just going to watch the other 5 endings because I don't have 200 more hours in my life. I mean, maybe that's becoming an old man, but you know,
13 endings.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just me being an old man or whatever, but like that, you know, if a game has a dozen different endings, a lot of times I'm not going to play through it. That being said, you know, give me a dozen endings in a FromSoft game, I'll watch every single one of them. I will play through the game 12 times and get every single ending.
Yeah, I mean,
Silent Hill 2, I had to go through and get the dog ending. I had to get the dog ending. But that, just like the dog ending, Silent Hill 2, people didn't know the freaking dog ending existed. It's such a troll ending. Yeah. It's such a troll ending.
Final Fantasy 9, I think it was last year. Games was 20 years old by then. They found a side quest that was never discovered before. First time ever, like last year.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But you don't have those moments now. Yeah. Now it's like game comes out, somebody takes the game and rips the game files apart and finds every little possible thing in the entire thing. And you have people putting full gameplay videos, full walkthroughs on YouTube the moment that it comes out. And you have tips and trick guides, your shorts feed and your TikToks are full of how do you maximize your gameplay in XYZ game? What's the OP character in XYZ game? Blah, blah, blah. 10 secrets, you know?
When the first Final Fantasy VII remake came out, I went to extreme lengths not to know anything about that game. And I did. I had to wait until it came out on Steam before I could play it. I didn't have a PlayStation.
I mean, Elden Ring came out, and I spent the first night I gamed for 12 hours, took a 6-hour nap. Next day, 24-hour stream, slept. Next day, 12-hour stream. I literally 48-hour on the first weekend Elden Ring came out, and I still had a 150-hour playthrough so that I could try and get ahead of people getting content in front of my face, like to learn about stuff. And it's so difficult to avoid spoilers unless you completely shut the internet off. And obviously that's not necessarily possible.
For a year, no screenshots, no one watching, no one play it. I saw it on YouTube. I hurried up and scrolled away. Went for a whole year before it came up, for a year and a half, however long. And then I played it offline, so no one would tell me what to do. It was, and I'm happy I did that because it was a fucking amazing game. I was shocked through the whole game, and it was the best experience I've ever had. I had in the game in years.
Yeah, 7 remake and Rebirth. I definitely need to play both of those.
I haven't played Rebirth yet. I'm waiting for it to come on Steam.
It'll happen. It'll happen soon enough. It'll happen soon.
Oh
enough.
Yeah.
So, let's get 2 wrap up questions here. So first, what do you miss most about retro games? Like, what is the thing that, you know, just like, what is the element of retro games that you miss the most? I know we might have kind of danced over this, at least for me a little bit.
We did. Hard question for me because I live in the retro. Everything.
You don't miss it. You don't miss it because you just live in it.
Yeah, I would have to say I miss the storytelling. Some of the old games, even if it was like, let me think of an example. Even Ninja Gaiden, like the first, the SNES. had a small story, and it compact every you knew what was going on. No, not really. No, it tells you. I have to read storytelling, even with the old JRPGs. Some of the best stories, and then the music, the composers, the everything just mashing together perfect.
I mean, that's one of the
You
reasons
don't
why I
get that
like
nowadays.
Shining Force. It had a great story, in my opinion. I mean, the story was simple: big bad evil is going to take over the world and destroy everything, right? And I mean, like, sure, but you had these little side stories, these little side characters, and each one of them felt unique and special. And you were making progress. It felt good. And yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I think that just I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I just loved the element of sharing your experience with the other people that were playing the same games you were, and like that I feel
couch
is
co-op
missed.
don't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe the other thing which I sort of still exists is like, this is an old arcade thing, was just having lives. having a limited number of lives and having fail states in your game. Like I remember playing Sonic, and that was the thing, is just like, you would go through and you would, play the game for an hour and then get to some level and die to the boss 3 times, and now you're back at the beginning. And there was some amount of that was frustrating, but at the same time there was a lot of that was very, very fun.
Time to get better.
Time to get good, right? What do you think? So I'll leave with this. What is the thing from retro games that you think could be brought to modern games and make modern games better? My vote is
more passion.
My vote is limited life pool. Add more games to the fail condition. More passion. What do you mean by more passion?
Less cash grabs.
So less microtransactions and more. More.
I mean, I don't mind micro. I'm not saying micro. Yeah, that's the thing. You get rid of those, but get a team together and make a game that they actually want to work on, and not the next, again, Overwatch, or not the next Arena, Fortnite, whatever. Make something that people are actually going to be like, hey, they want to come back to this again in 20 years and play it.
I would say that there's a lot of hope for that happening. Steam has certainly made it much better for indie games. Yeah. And I don't mean indie developers like Hades indie developers, that the indie developer teams are like 40 people. There's a lot of games that only have like 1 or 2 people on them, that are in the sub 10, like less than $10 section of Steam, that are just amazing. One of the games I'd like to talk about just for like a hot minute is Frog Monster, made by one guy. It's absolutely incredible. Has a really unique art style. And I mean, those kind of games exist and don't necessarily play on the nostalgia of other games. But there's also games that do play on the nostalgia of other games. There's a bunch of Doom clones, and there's a bunch of Metroidvania clones, and there's a bunch of different things like that. That exist within the indie space. But there's also a lot of things that are truly unique. Like I just played Inscription. I know Inscription came out like 2 years ago or something like that at this point, or maybe 3 years ago. But man, oh man, was that an awesome indie experience. That had just it had a retro feel to it as well, but oh my goodness, was it a unique experience for me. Probably unlike any other game I've ever played.
Speaking of unique, I just remembered the game I played last year. It was Japanese only. The only reason I was able to play it is from you can find English translations for anything. Old JRPG for SNES called Treasures of This that's the English name. But it's 4 different stories. Each story has their own people. They all meet up, pick whichever story you want to play through all of them. But the battle system and the magic system is you make the magic by just naming the spell. So you can whatever you put random letters in there. You make a spell. What will it do? Don't know. Could it be better? Probably.
You don't know until you make the spell, right?
Yeah. You can go through it while you can look it up. But it's fun just doing your own thing. And you can just literally spend hours just typing names or random letters or whatever just to make your spell pool so you can fight these monsters, go through the game with it. And I thought that was the coolest thing I've seen in a JRPG.
That's awesome.
This was back in the SNES era. Yeah.
I mean, that reminds me of like Monster Hunter back in the day. That was just like, take a disc and put it in your system, and it would scan it and then make a monster based on whatever CD you put in there. And you could put in a music CD, or you could put in another game or whatever, and it would just make a monster off of the disc.
That'd be cool. They had a game like that on mobile. Square Enix even made it, where you could get MP3s and make your monsters from the MP3s.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was on a mobile game.
That's pretty dope. So, I mean, I think ingenuity and passion is not necessarily dead in the game market. Like, not everything is an Overwatch clone. I think there's some high hopes for that. And I mean, even what might be what you would consider to be AAA titles, there are a lot of companies that are trying to grasp at newer stuff, and it's mostly the companies that are behind them. Like, the developers want to do new and risky and interesting things, but the companies that are funding those projects, well, they want to guarantee that they're going to be able to make money off of those projects, because if they don't make money off the projects, there isn't another project, And that's just the necessary evil of the industry, right? Even back in the arcade days, the reason why Pac-Man turned into Mrs. Pac-Man was because of people going in and hacking Pac-Man systems so that the levels were more randomized. That ended up, because the levels were more randomized, people couldn't learn the levels, which made them lose more often, which made them put more quarters in the machine. Right. So, more money
around.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Dgrade. I appreciate you taking the time with to sit with me and talk about retro games. This has been awesome. An awesome kind of like walk down memory lane, and I'm sure for me, I hope for you as well. And I'd love to have you on again. Is there anything that you want to leave off anybody with? Are you streaming regularly, or
I stream when I can. Yeah, I stream when I can. I work 100 to 120 hours a week. So
driving everywhere.
Very far. Yeah, driving everywhere. One of those things.
In the truck all the time.
Driving everywhere. All the time.
Well, if you're watching, definitely follow Dgrade on Twitch. I'll put the link at the bottom below. If you like this podcast, you want to see more stuff, comment in or leave a comment. Say, hey, I want you guys to talk about this topic. I want to join your podcast. I want to do whatever. Leave a comment, subscribe, all that stuff. And we'll see you guys next time. Stay classy, friends. Have a good one.
Peace.